Hello and welcome. I'm Anand Naidu filling in for Riz Khan. The United States Detention Center at Guantanamo Bay provokes intense controversy and emotional responses whenever it's mentioned. Human rights groups and former prisoners allege torture routinely takes place at the island prison. But U.S. officials have consistently maintained that detainees are treated humanely in accordance with international law. On today's show, we talk to a former Guantanamo prisoner and take a closer look at those allegations of torture. The detention center is a United States military prison on the shores of Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. Since the beginning of the war in Afghanistan, over 770 detainees have been held at the prison. Approximately 420 have since been released. Those held at this prison are classified enemy combatants by the U.S. government. Now, don't forget, we take your calls on the show, and today the question we are asking is, what should be done about the U.S. detention center at Guantanamo Bay? Don't forget that you can reach us at the numbers at the bottom of your screen there. Now, joining us on the show today are Murat Kurnas, a Turkish citizen living in Germany. He was arrested in Pakistan soon after the attacks of September 11th and spent 5 years at Guantanamo. He's the author of the newly published book, 5 Years of My Life, An Innocent Man in Guantanamo. Also from London, I'm joined by Andy Worthington of Reprieve, an anti-death penalty group. He's the author of the Guantanamo Files, the stories of the 774 detainees in America's illegal prison. And here in Washington, I'm joined by Paul Glastris, editor of the Washington Monthly magazine, whose current issue calls for Guantanamo to be shut down. Welcome to all of you. Murat, if I could start with you, you spent, as I'd mentioned, 5 years at the detention center at Guantanamo Bay. How did you end up in the prison?
I was in a trip in Pakistan, and I was done with my trip in Pakistan. I was ready to go back home. I was in a bus, and there was a checkpoint where they stopped the bus, and just they came and asked me to went out of the bus, and later over they gave me over to the Americans for a bounty of $3,000.
And you were taken to Kandahar, if I remember correctly.
Yes, after a while in Pakistan, I spent time in Pakistan in a prison, and after a while I had my first interrogation by American government, and later on they picked me up and brought me over to an American base in Kandahar and kept me over there.
Now, you were 19 years old at the time. What made you up and leave in the first place and go to Pakistan?
I saw a group, it's called Jamaat Tabligh. I saw them in Germany, and they're going to homeless pupils, speaking to them, helping them to get a job and to find a home for them, or they're helping young people having problem with drugs. And it was exactly the same thing what I like to do, to help other ones. And after I talked a couple times to the Tablighis, they told me about the school in Pakistan. It's a second biggest Islamic foundation on the world. It's a world famous school over there. And I decided to do the trip long time before 11 September was happened.
Why didn't you tell members of your family that you were leaving to go to Pakistan?
I was a teenager. They didn't want to let me go, and so I myself, I didn't saw that this could be a problem in Pakistan, because when I made the trip there wasn't start a war in Afghanistan between USA and Afghanistan. So I saw this can't be a problem. Even the war, if it's about to start, it couldn't be a problem. That was what I saw.
Now, while you were at Guantanamo Bay, you were questioned by the military at Guantanamo Bay. What did they want to know from you?
They didn't want to know and really who I am. That was the point. They had nothing against me, and that was they forced me to sign papers, what saying I'm a terrorist, or I used to fight with Al Qaeda together against American soldiers, and they forced me to sign those kind of papers. And because I didn't, they tortured me. They hanged me on chains for 5 days, and they tortured me by electroshocks because I didn't sign those papers. And they did waterboarding and many other kind of torture.
And look, I should say that we did invite the Pentagon, that's the Department of Defense, which is in charge of Guantanamo, to be on the show, but they declined. They did, in fact, send us a written response to our questions, and one of the responses we got here from Commander Jeffrey Gordon, who's a Pentagon spokesman at the Secretary for Defense, at the Office of the Secretary for Defense, and he said, "We treat all detainees humanely. To suggest that the young men and women of the U.S. military who serve honorably and under the world's microscope were engaged in regular and systematic torture of detainees cannot withstand even the slightest scrutiny." I just wanted to get that on the record there. That was the response we got from the Pentagon. Now, Murat, you say in one part of your book that there were American doctors at this facility at Guantanamo Bay. Were you regularly examined by these doctors?
There was during my time over there, inside those 5 years, there came many doctors and gone. They just it was up to your interrogator if you did need medication. It was just up to your interrogator if you was authorized to get it or not.
Okay, and when you were freed, what were you told?
When I was what?
When you were freed, when you were let go, when you were told you could go back to Germany, what were you told by the people at Guantanamo?
They tried until the last day to make me sign those papers. They brought me to a room. They didn't tell me that I'm going home. They just came and they brought me civilian clothes, a jeans jacket and the pants. They threw over the fence and told me I have to put those on. And later on they brought me in a room. There came many higher rank ups, military people with camera people and photographs, and told me that I'm ready to go home, just I need to sign those papers. And I said I'm not going to sign those papers. I refused. They told me if you don't sign, you will stay of the rest of your life here. And I said I'm not going to sign. So they got angry and gone out of the room. After then, they brought me to the airplane and flew me back to Germany.
All right, Murat, thank you very much for joining us there. Let me turn to Andy Worthington, also in London. Andy, you've looked at some of the legal aspects of the situation at Guantanamo Bay. Does the U.S. Constitution and the provisions in that Constitution apply to those prisoners at Guantanamo Bay?
Well, I think really when you capture people in wartime, as the U.S. administration has alleged, and Murat is one of many examples of people who are captured so far from the battlefield that doesn't really count. But if you're going to capture people in wartime, then they should be subjected to the Geneva Conventions. Now, that's not what happened in this case. If that's not the case, and you're looking for terrorists, and you're going to capture them, then the other way to pursue that is to put them into the United States court system and to hold proper trials. The third avenue, the one that was dreamt up by the administration, is clearly unconstitutional, and yeah, that's the basic answer to that.
Okay. Paul Glasseris, here in Washington, your magazine, The Washington Monthly, devoted an entire issue to this issue of torture and detention without trial. You've got contributions from former President Jimmy Carter, the current Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi, and the one common message in all those contributions that you have is that torture ought to stop. But the response from the Bush administration has been consistently, we don't do torture.
Right. Well, there's a kind of doublespeak going on that that we don't torture, and therefore, because we say we don't torture, obviously a lot of abuses that most people would think of as torture and that technically under international law is considered torture has happened on this administration's watch.
Well, that's exactly it, isn't it? Isn't there the problem is a legal definition of torture?
Right, right. Well, you know, torture has not been difficult to define for the last 30, 40 years. The United States understood what torture is and refused to allow its soldiers and spies to engage in it until 9/11, after 9/11, when as Andrew was saying, things were loosened. And now the administration has sort of been caught, and they are refusing both to admit that they've made a mistake, but also they're hanging on to the presidential authority that they believe the Constitution gives them to engage in this sort of behavior without scrutiny by the courts or Congress. And by the way, it was not just Jimmy Carter and Nancy Pelosi. We had many Republicans, including high-ranking members of the Bush administration, writing articles on this issue. And really, this is the idea that torture should not be something the United States should ever engage in is a mainstream idea here in Washington and throughout the country. And the diversion has been the odd thing that's happened under this administration.
Okay. Andy Worthington, we've received an email here from Kathleen Katsona from Idaho in the United States. I'm going to read this email and then I have a question for you. And the email says, the base should be closed. Rumsfeld, Rice, Bush and Cheney should all be put on trial as war criminals at The Hague. These people are war criminals. Let me ask you this. Has anyone broken the law here?
Yeah, I think the law has been broken from the moment that they that all international norms and all domestic law was broken by the administration. You know, those people that have been mentioned there are the most prominent people. Behind the scenes are the lawyers who helped to draft these claims that existing laws didn't count. So that would be David Addington, Dick Cheney's chief of staff, who was formerly his chief counsel, and John Yoo and Alberto Gonzalez, and several other people who flagrantly broke the law. So I agree with your respondent. Yes.
What, you know, some of these people, some of the enemy combatants, as they're called by the United States, are going to be tried under a military tribunal system. What is the legal status of that system?
Well, the military commissions was another thing that was dreamt up after 9/11, and that was pushed through by Dick Cheney and David Addington. It was in November 2001, and it authorized trials for suspected terrorists, where the burden of proof was nothing like it would be in the U.S. court system or even the U.S. military's own judicial system. It was empowered to use secret evidence, and it was evidence that could be obtained through torture or coercion or all kinds of questionable means which wouldn't be revealed to the defendants. Now, this was actually thrown out by the Supreme Court in 2006. The president then went back to Congress. It was reauthorized in a form where evidence through torture is not supposed to be allowed, but evidence obtained through coercively can be allowed at the discretion of the judge. It remains a thoroughly discredited system, and it's been stumbling on, you know, since 2003 when the first cases were announced. They have yet to conclude a successful prosecution. The only thing that came close was David Hicks, the Australian, who he accepted a plea bargain and was returned to Australia. But in terms of actually coming up with a successful prosecution in any of these military commissions, it's really something that looks highly unlikely, because as with everything else, to destroy a system that works and to create a new one that is patently unfair is not going to meet with any kind of international approval. My feeling about the commissions is that they will eventually collapse, and that those people who are genuinely regarded as dangerous will have to be moved to the US mainland, to the US court system, and take it from there.
Paul, if we look at the situation right now in the United States, we've got an election campaign for president going on right now. Are you concerned that this particular issue of torture, this issue of the detentions taking place at Guantanamo, has actually been pushed to the back burner? I mean, you don't hear the candidates talk much about this.
No, you don't. And there's a number of reasons for this. It's kind of a downer of an issue to be bringing up on the campaign trail. Moreover, both on the Republican and the Democratic sides, you have candidates who have spoken out pretty strongly against torture, though, you know, John McCain has waffled a little bit on the Republican side in recent months, but in general, this is not a dispute between the candidates, so it doesn't make a lot of news. Nevertheless, I think we'll look back some years hence at this period of time and wonder, you know, what will be the big issues that we remember and the great shame that we'll feel in this country, and torture will be the issue. And I do fear that because it's not being talked about in the campaign, that there is some chance, an outside chance, that whoever wins the White House in November will feel the pressure of the security bureaucracy to leave enough of a loophole to do torture, which I think would be a big mistake.
Would that include a Democrat?
It could. You know, there are a lot of people who sincerely believe that some of these methods have garnered information that has been of extreme value. I haven't seen evidence of it, but people who work on this sincerely believe it. That pressure and other kinds of political pressure and just enough doubt about what the right thing to do is may lead to some kind of a loophole, but we'll have to see.
You know, when there is talk about torture, there is ambivalence on at least one scenario, and that is what they call the ticking time bomb scenario. Yeah. Under any circumstances, could torture be justified under those circumstances?
Well, you know, it is such an extremely unlikely scenario. And I think President Bill Clinton has said there are certain scenarios under which a president may choose to do something like that, to literally break the law because he or she thinks it's right, and then open himself to public scrutiny and say, look, I did this, here's why I did this, and I throw myself at the mercy of the public. That's not the same as crafting law that gives a government the right and then it empowers a bureaucracy to sort of mindlessly go about, not mindlessly, but sort of routinely go about abusing prisoners in this way. It's been a disaster for the United States in almost every respect. And I think that's why you're seeing both Republicans and Democrats who are very realistic about U.S. security interests saying that we have to have a very bright line on torture and go back to the system that worked fine for this country for decades.
You know, besides the legal aspects of torture and the legal aspects of detaining people and without giving them a chance to go to court and fight their case, has the United States lost moral ground here?
Oh, there's no question. There's no question. I mean, it's going to require the next president coming clean about this, making bright line policy statements about it, and saying what we did over those 7 years was a ghastly miscalculation, not part of what we believe are true American values, certainly not part of international values. I think that such a statement, if sincere and followed by policies, will be accepted, and there's enough of a hunger for the United States to play a leadership role that I think the country can recover, but there's no question it's been very damaging.
And thank you for being with us. Riz is back on Monday. On the next show, he takes a look at carbon emissions trading, a system of raising environmental awareness for large corporations that's drawn some criticism. See you next time. Street Talk is coming up next.